Of the Magi, a study of modern Zoroastrianism by James Hope Moulton. We're starting today with Chapter 6, Parsi Piety. I stood in the mists of the world, and in flesh I was seen of them. I found all drunken, and none found I athirst among them. And my soul is grieved over the sons of men, because they are blind and see not, poor and know not their poverty. Agrafon Jesu. The supreme test of a religion is its power of producing saints. If it can do this, there must be life in it, however encrusted it be with error and beset with elements that historically and practically compel strong condemnation. If it cannot, the purest and loftiest theory of religion, the most splendid array of poetry and philosophy, will not redeem it from an inexorable doom. And what are saints? It would be a bold thing to attempt a definition. Beauty, poetry, love, all the greatest things of life, refuse to be defined. But the book, which has made more saints than all other books put together, has a summary which goes far towards the portraiture we seek. He hath shown thee, O man, what is good, and what doth Jehovah require of thee, but to justify, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. Yahweh, more likely, because there's no J sound in that language. Micah 6:8. There is none other commandment greater than these, which bid men love their neighbor as themselves, and their God with all their heart and life, with minds and strength. By such tokens the King of Saints knows his own in every land. One who loves and reveres Zarathustra confesses with keen reluctance that saintship seems less easy to find in his community than in some religions, which are far inferior in the apprehension of truth. Well, certainly everybody would consider their own spiritual path to be the utmost. We got to go a little beyond, well, okay, it's the best, I have the best religion, the most true, and a lot of people say that. There is differing degrees of good and truth in different paths, but the reader will have realized ere that with all its grandeur and purity, Zoroastrianism as a whole has a certain coldness. The glow of the Gathas cools down at once when we get out of the prophet's own period. Indeed, if one must analyze a teacher one prefers to admire, even Zarathustra hardly stands out among the goodly fellowship of the prophets for warmth and tenderness and passion. Well, as the Quran says, don't make discriminations between them. Don't invent distinctions. He is tremendously in earnest and sees truth with intense clearness. Well, if you compare what's said of the Gathas, you could say that love is a more important thing than the New Testament, if you're going to be real about it, and it's even more important than the Quran. He is tremendously in earnest, and he sees truth with an intense clearness. But the human tragedy, as it appeals to Gautama, leaves uncertain hints of its presence in the Gathas. Truth is great and will prevail, but only when helped by love, which is greater still, and love is not the power that inspires the Gathas. The very word is practically absent from them. In Yasna 49:8, I have accepted Geldner's rendering of a word occurring nowhere else, and read to all eternity we would be beloved, that is, by God. But Bartholomew and the Pahlavi tradition take it otherwise, and if Geldner is right, it is but the exception proving the rule. There is another characteristic of Zoroastrianism. Well, Mazda Yesnehe Zarathustra. I hate how Westerners like to name religions after important figures in them, like they're all sort of Christian, what does Muhammad do? It's like, well, a Muslim worships God, not Muhammad, that sort of stuff. There's another characteristic of Zoroastrianism, early and later, which has worked against the production of saints. There's relatively little opening for the cultivation of self-renunciation. Okay, well, goodly people aren't all mendicants, thank you very much. Dr. Dalla says very truly, Zoroastrianism stands for self-assertion. Despite their insignificant numbers, the inherent and dominant characteristics of the Parsis made them self-sufficient in the midst of the Hindus of Gujarat, whose religious ideals were self-surrender and self-renunciation. But can we be so sure that the Parsi ideal here is claimed is really of more value religiously than what is assigned to the Hindu? What if the quality be not really the secret of the amazing vitality of Hinduism and the self-assertion of the Parsi, the very quality which accounts for the failure of his religion and the struggle for existence? Let us pursue this question on highly favorable ground to the defender of Parsi ideals. We have seen that in all periods the religion of Zarathustra has utterly repudiated asceticism. There are very strong reasons for applauding its attitude as ideally sound, and yet we must admit that this involves the closing of a door of self-sacrifice, which has often led to high degrees of sainthood. It is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God, and Parsi religion definitely encourages the getting of riches. Logic and religion alike combine to declare the man who has children a potential benefactor to his fellow men, and the ascetic is, no doubt, revealed in history not infrequently as a charlatan seeking glory of men or occult power from heaven or hell. Nevertheless, he has been very often utterly sincere. Well, he's seeking a connection with heaven or hell, that's sincere too, right? And animated by the passion of self-sacrifice for the highest ends, such men have chosen the hard path, and per ardua ad athera is a law which all experience has guaranteed to accept the world and make the best of it, for its creator's sake, seems to be demanded by very loyalty to him. If he made us with two eyes, it seems an insult to his wisdom that we should pluck one out and cast it from us as a snare that brings us into evil. And yet, the deepest religious instinct has always told us that the way of renunciation is the way of highest good. Actually, no, that religion is about a relationship, and renunciation is not using the tools that you get. There's different types of renunciation. Are you renouncing the fruits and being grateful for whatever fruits, whatever benefits you get in life, and doing good because it's the good? And Zarathustra himself chose that way when he became a missionary and suffered hardship with his gospel, to use God's gifts and not refuse them, to take the call to sacrifice when it comes and go not out of the way to find it, is no doubt the higher and truer way. The trivial round, the common task, will furnish all we ought to ask, room to deny ourselves a road to bring us daily nearer God. Yet, for the hardness of men's hearts, there has sometimes been given a divine leading on a very different road, since the acceptance and right use of the world is so much more dangerous for a poor human nature than the course that brings self-sacrifice. Even though the particular self-sacrifice be needless and almost wrong, it is this absence of a strong call to sacrifice which lies at the root, it would seem, of the failure of Parsi religion today. For that the religion has failed, it is impossible for the most kindly observer to question. The mere counting of the community determines our answer. For every follower that Zarathustra claims today, Gautama claims thousands. It is useless to reply that Buddhists have diverged immensely from the system and the ideals of their founder. The Parsis, as we have seen, are no less removed from theirs, but it is possible in both cases to recognize a certain responsibility for the sequel in the character of the impulse originally imparted. So far as we have the materials for comparison, Zarathustra was as great, as earnest, as noble, and truth-loving as Gautama himself, and his doctrine was far superior in that he rested all his hopes for man upon the power, the wisdom, and the beneficence of God. Gautama was never met with theism in a form that could help him in his problem, left God out of his solution. Well, it could be that that was what people forgot about him, not that he didn't mention it. There are a couple mentions that make it sound like he was a theist, just not the sort of theist who went around worshiping angels and using idols and various other things. That's very often the monotheist is treated as an atheist. His own apotheosis by later ages is the nemesis of Gautama's failure. Well, again, the failure is in the people, not Gautama. All men crave for God, says Homer, and if their inherited religion has nothing to worship, they will borrow something or make it for themselves. For God has created us for himself, and whatever theory men may form to solve the riddle of life and soothe the smart of its pain, the human heart must always be restless till it rest in him, in such an apprehension of him as the blurred mirror of this world will enable men to seize.